Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have Graham Lau, an astrobiologist at Blue Marble Space and host of the NASA show Ask an Astrobiologist. So welcome, Graham. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll start off. I'm an astrobiologist and science communicator. That's how I identify when people ask me what I do. However, I wear a lot of hats when it comes to the different positions that I hold. I am the Director of Communications and Marketing for Blue Marble Space. We are a nonprofit organization headquartered in the US, but doing business around the world, very much focused on the future of our species, on sustainability, on space exploration. But the main focus of Blue Marble Space as a nonprofit is kind of being an umbrella organization that oversees a lot of initiatives led by scientists who are interested in being entrepreneurs as well. And so we have an initiative called Green Space. It's an indoor microgreen growing farm in Pennsylvania. We have SciWorthy, which is a news site where you can read about current research that's going on, research in the last 2 years that journalists and scientists take the research and they write about it in a way that's understandable for anyone and has no bias added to it. We also have our research institute, which is BMSIS, or the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science. And so I'm also a research scientist with BMSIS. And so for BMSIS, we are like this international community. We have 72 research scientists. We have over 60 visiting scholars at various levels of their careers. Every summer, we have the Young Scientist program, which I'm also the director of. That program, this year, we had 66 interns from 16 different nations. Out of 325 applications from over 40 nations from around the world. So it's a very international program for college students and those who finished a bachelor's degree to take part in research and work with us. We also have another initiative at Blue Marble Space called SeganNet, which I take part in. SeganNet, it started off as the social action for a grassroots astrobiology network, is a very long title. Basically to use the name of Carl Sagan for an astrobiology social network. It's now shifted over the years to being more of a way of providing resources for young people who are interested in careers in astrobiology and becoming astrobiologists. It's also the home of the NASA-funded show called Ask an Astrobiologist.
I don't know which one of those things I should address or I should take more interest in, because all of this sounds really interesting. So thank you so much for sharing. But before we actually start with the space questions, I would like to ask, how do you get the interest? Because I know that it kind of started when you were a kid, kind of like 5, correct me if I'm wrong. So maybe you can please share a little bit about this story.
You're right, I was 5, that is the story. And I always ask this for people who come on my show on Ask an Astrobiologist. One of my favorite things to find out about someone is what was their origin story that got them interested in their career or interested in some realm of thought or knowledge or business or learning. And for me, I was 5 years old. It was 1988, which tells you how old I am. And my parents, they took me to the movie theater to see a movie from Australia called Young Einstein. It was a comedy music movie. It's a fictional story of the life of Albert Einstein, growing up on an apple farm in Tasmania and discovering the secret formula of E equals MC squared to put bubbles into his beer. But I remember watching the movie. I loved the music. It had a really good 80s rock and roll soundtrack. And I remember loving this idea that there's this young guy who wants to uncover the secrets of the universe and learn more about math and physics while living a simple life. And so I went home that night and I told my mother 2 things. One, I told her that I wanted to play guitar. And so she helped me that night to make my very first guitar. We got a little shoebox and put some strings over it and pulled them tight. And I played that like a guitar. And now I've been playing guitar ever since 1988. And then I also told her that night that I want to be a scientist, that I want to be involved in this quest to understand everything and where we fit in everything.
And also after that, after a couple of years, I know that you did an internship at NASA. So how somehow these got related to what you're doing right now?
While earning my first couple of degrees, I earned in chemistry and biology at a small college in Pennsylvania. And while I was there, it was a wonderful college. It's called York College of Pennsylvania. It's a very great school, but it's also a very small school. And so there weren't as many research experiences available for me as an undergraduate student. And so I had to go and look for internships in other places. And so my first internship in 2006 was at the Graduate School of Oceanography in Rhode Island. And that kind of helped me get some research experience in the realm of marine molecular biology, and to have enough of a solid background then to apply to an internship in 2007 with NASA called the NASA Academy. That internship is no longer available, but it was an internship where myself and several others, I think we had 15 in our group, spent the summer over 10 weeks working, each of us working in a laboratory at NASA Ames, and then all of us together working on a large group project as well. And it was an incredible experience. I had the chance to work in the lab of Dave Demarais. Dave is actually just now this year retiring from NASA, and I still talk to him regularly. We're both part of the Center for Life Detection. We're both part of the Network for Life Detection. And so it's been nice all these years knowing him and knowing of his research. He does incredible research related to Mars exploration. And even in the summer in 2007, when I worked for him, he was the lead for science for the Spirit rover that summer, which was one of the Mars exploration rovers. And so it was cool to work in his lab. I also worked in a group project led by our friend David Smith, who many years later, he earned his PhD and ended up working as a research scientist at NASA Ames, and is now a slightly higher up kind of level chief at NASA Ames, and oversees a lot of science going on. Both of those experiences, working in a lab relevant to geomicrobiology and life and Mars, and then also working on a project, using aircraft to sample material from the atmosphere. Those things really helped me a lot in developing a research background. I then, after that, decided to study astrophysics and then geology. And a big part of that was my experiences in the NASA Academy. We also met Peter Diamandis. He's the founder of the X Prize Foundation and the Zero G Corporation. He has a new podcast out about mindsets and moonshots. And Peter's like just one of those very thoughtful people who's thinking of the future of humanity and what space exploration does for us, what technology does for us. He's an entrepreneur and investor. And speaking to him, it really made me realize that I didn't have to just do biology and chemistry. I could also do other things like planetary science through astrophysics and geology. I could also get involved in business and things like that. And so that was a really cool thing. Meeting him kind of really inspired me to think not just like a scientist, but also like an entrepreneur.
And talking about business, now that you're mentioning, like, I know that you guys talk a lot about the business of space. So here's my question, like, why should people invest in space, science, and innovation?
Yeah, and it's a huge question, right? And there are many answers, and there are two that I'll say right away. And one comes from like the science and what it means to be human right now, and the other comes from the actual return on investment, the ROI. And so for the first part, I mean, the science, just for us to explore space, is a natural continuation of what we've been doing as a species. Since we started, using language and writing and creating stories and learning more about ourselves, we've wanted to know about our place, whether it be on Earth, in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. We want to know where we come from and where we're going. And so space exploration is the natural next step in that process. And it makes me, as an astrobiologist, it makes me wonder, like, life happens to planets. We only have one example so far, but there could be other worlds, and there may be many worlds out there where life has happened. And so is there a biological imperative in the universe for life to not only happen to a planet and then evolve with the planet, but does that life also have an imperative to then go out and populate and seed other planets? And I personally think that might be the case. And so there's a natural drive, I think, for our species, and I think for any intellectual species that develops culture and society and starts to build forward, to want to also leave its planet and see itself from space and to have a better idea of its place, but also to spread out more. And so I think we are on the path of becoming multiplanetary. And by going to space right now, I think it really helps people around the world to realize how much of a part of the bigger picture they are. And so that is like the grand picture, the big investment. However, on the business side of things, there is so much money to be made in space and the business of space. And honestly, I mean, we see so many companies now coming online, and I don't like the word new space or the term. We've been saying new space for like 20 years now. it's not new anymore. It's actually space. We're doing space exploration. It's not new.
Heavy space.
Yeah, it's just space, and we've been doing it for a long time. And there's so many companies now, doing all kinds of stuff with satellites in low Earth orbit, companies who are now getting invested in the possible upcoming next generation space stations, new space telescopes, new spacecraft. And there's a lot of money to be made in space exploration, from these large constellations of satellites that will bring worldwide internet to everyone, to having so many cameras now in space looking down at our world. It not just offers us like a really cool picture of the Earth from above, but it allows us to monitor our planet, to monitor changes in weather patterns and climate, to monitor things like floods and landslides and explosions and things like that. I mean, there's so much we can watch from space, from satellites. And so we are at a really interesting time right now as a species where we are very quickly populating the space around our planet with spacecraft.
Totally. And that's such an interesting perspective because, I mean, on my day-to-day, like interviewing CEOs and people in the space industry, I find really interesting the fact that everyone keeps investing in space. And space is an industry that keeps developing and has been developing for the last couple of years, and it hasn't stopped. So I think that's a really great perspective. And I think you're right, totally. So thank you for sharing that. And talking about astrobiology, like what kind of missions are you guys planning on, on working on for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, there are really cool things happening right now. Not only, things going on in solar system missions like the DART redirect we just did, and we've shown that like we humans for the first time have altered the trajectory of an object in our solar system. That's incredible. But we also have missions with life detection currently happening and coming up. So right now, for instance, we have Perseverance on Mars roving around with its little Ingenuity drone. Perseverance, part of its mission is to look for signs of life. It's the first attempt since the Viking landers that really has life detection written into the mission concept. It's also collecting samples that we might end up returning to Earth someday soon in a joint venture between NASA and ESA. They might bring those samples back to Earth, which is pretty cool. We might actually find the first signs of past or even present Martian life in those samples. It's hard to say if life ever happened there. We also, recently, a couple of years ago, there was this big news about the possibility of phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. Whether or not that phosphine is even there, and whether or not it could be related to biology, the really cool thing about that is that it inspired people to want to get more spacecraft back to Venus. We do have an upcoming mission that's supposed to launch in 2024. It's currently being built right now at JPL. You can actually watch once a week. They do a live stream from the clean room, and they are available to answer questions. They have mission scientists come on who will answer questions about this development for this mission called Europa Clipper. This mission will go out to the Jovian system. It will orbit around Jupiter and Europa together, and it's going to get really high resolution mapping and imaging of Europa's surface. It'll do a lot of really cool spectroscopy for understanding the chemistry of the surface. It will also let us know a little bit more about that ocean, how deep it really is, its extent. And honestly, there's so many other cool things in the works right now. New space telescopes that are being developed that may one day get funded and go to space. Of course, right now, the James Webb Space Telescope, we've only seen the very first little bits of data being released. I mean, it just started collecting light earlier this year, and already we're seeing these incredible images. We're seeing galaxies not just 4 billion light years away, but 13 billion light years away. And, we're getting spectra from exoplanet atmospheres already. And so there's so many cool things right now that are happening or might be happening very soon.
A lot of great things coming, and especially since we have like a lot of space startups which are developing great things in space that we might not know what they're working on right now, but I'm pretty sure that they will develop some really cool stuff, just like you're mentioning. Like all of these missions, they sound super exciting. And okay, so one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, like, what would you say are some of the challenges that space research might help like solving?
Oh man, I mean, there's so much that we get from space. It's not just the investment in the people and inspiring people. It's not just the investment that we get in business and the return financially, the money that you can make in space exploration. There's so much that we get from materials science, biological science, medicine, technology. There's so much that comes back to us from space. NASA for many years has produced this magazine called NASA Spinoff, and it just gives a small sampling of many of the different products and technologies and methodologies and things like that have come from space exploration over the years. And people are always like, oh yeah, we have like the space pen and Tang, and they point to some of these early things from space exploration, but there's so much more, from development of microprocessors and improved computational technologies, our cameras. The development of the digital camera and developing better cameras was really about space exploration, developing better cameras for looking at our Earth and for looking at other worlds in space. There's so much for technology, for communications technologies. We have to communicate with our spacecraft in low Earth orbit and around other worlds, and even traveling out of our solar system. Like, there are so many things that we've developed and had to learn, and it's really been a humongous payoff for humanity. And honestly, anyone who works in the realm of space, whether it's the business of space, exploration of space, the science of space, we all hear it from time to time. Someone comes up and they ask us, why do we waste money on space when we have so many problems here on Earth? And it's almost like this thing, and we see it on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Reddit, like it's all over the internet, and our politicians talk about it as though somehow if you invest in space, you have to give up on the Earth. And that's so absurd to me, because almost everyone I've ever met who's really invested in space exploration is also really invested in the Earth. A lot of companies, private companies that have invested in space exploration, have done remarkable things for our planet. And NASA, ESA, JAXA, ISRO, there are so many governmental space agencies that are putting money, real money, not just into space and building spacecraft, but into better helping people here on Earth.
And one of the last questions, actually, the last question, do you have any advice for any future entrepreneurs starting on this space path?
I think when it comes to anything, not just for those who want to get involved in the business of space or engineering related to space exploration, or like myself, the science that's related to space exploration. And this is the case, I give this kind of advice for everybody when I give talks about how to be an astrobiologist and how to be involved in space. It's that you have to be a generalist as well as a specialist. So for all of us, we have to specialize in something that makes us unique, that gives us, as David Perel would say, a personal monopoly. It makes us unique and gives us our own space, but it's also how others recognize us online. Some of us as micro influencers or influencers in social media space are usually known for like at least one unique thing that makes them kind of their own special thing. And when it comes to like science and engineering, you can really specialize in a very specific discipline, where you become the world's expert in one single thing. But we also need more generalists in the world. We need people who have a liberal arts style background. And there's a reason for that, and it's because it gives us clarity and it gives us connectivity in understanding our place in the bigger picture. So one of my favorite episodes from an old show called Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I grew up on The Next Gen. I love that show. For Star Trek fans out there, you probably know it very well. It's the show where Patrick Stewart played Captain Picard. And there's one episode called Samaritan Snare from the second season of this show, where this captain of this starship is with a young man named Wesley Crusher. They're inside of a small shuttle together, a small spacecraft, and they're traveling together through space. And during one of their conversations on this shuttle, the captain asks the young man if he read a book that he had given him. And the young man says, no, I don't think, and I think it was a book of poetry, I can't quite recall, but he's like, this won't be on my exams. And the captain says, most of the important things won't be. And he says, anyone can be taught the mechanics of how to pilot a starship, but, you have to have more. That if you invest in things like philosophy and art, history and culture, then it kind of makes everything else make sense. And I think we need that as a species. We need people who aren't just specialized in a single area, but who have a vested interest in everything and can really kind of relate to the human journey of it all.
And thank you so much for being here, for sharing your experiences. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, the best is cosmobiota.com. That's Cosmo and then biota.com. You can also find me in most social networks as @cosmobiologist. Even though on LinkedIn, I'm @astrobiologist, but you can find me in most places. If you search my name, you'll find me.
Perfect, thank you. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one, directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Graham, thank you so much for taking the time. Highly appreciate it, and we'll make sure to keep listening to your episodes.
Sounds great. Thank you.